Okay guys, so in this video we are going to talk about junior code tests, so let's get into it. Now in the previous video I walked you through the different questions I would ask a developer to kind of assess their understanding of front-end development, and in this video we are actually going to talk about a coding test that I think will illustrate very quickly what skill level somebody is at. Now, I argue that this is not a perfect code test. This is just a sort of code test that I would be very comfortable if my boss came to me today and said, "Hey, Frederick, can you put together a code test?" This is something along. I would still change a few things about this depending on what the company wants, but this would be the backbone of the type of thing that I would make. So in this video we're going to talk about the junior code test. In the next video we're going to talk about the senior code tests, but let's get into it. So this is our base project. I'll walk you through all the files and everything, so just don't worry about it. So the task that we're going to show our junior is this, and this is not timed in any way. I don't care about how long it takes a junior to achieve a goal. I will give them something and then they will give it back to me, because I don't care so much about the time it takes when it comes to a junior to do this sort of thing, because I don't hire a junior that because I think that they are going to be super productive and like give me high quality software in the quickest time possible. I hire a junior because I am betting that that's going to be a good investment for me long term, because I already have senior staff that are capable of training a junior into someone who's truly productive and loyal to my company. That's the mindset here. So the first task, add basic responsive styles. Second task, get the to-do. So basically what we're building here, I actually noticed that I forgot to say that this is a to-do list. This is the application that you are going to build. I should actually add that into as well, but you're going to the task is to build a to-do list. So the first and foremost thing is to make sure that they are adding responsive styles. I want to see that they understand responsive design. Get the to-dos from the server and show them on the page. Add an input field to the to-do list so that you can actually add to-dos to the list. Add to-dos without refreshing the page. These are the tasks that I want to see from a junior, and this is all happening in vanilla JavaScript. Had I had a requirement for React or Angular or Vue or anything like that, the story would have been a little bit different. But since I'm making these videos as basically a request from a subscriber, and the specification, the request was that this was all in vanilla JavaScript, this is what I would do. So let's get into it. So first and foremost, we have a server that's simply listening on port 3000, and this is the file I would present to the junior, the base file. Like, you can ignore most of this stuff. I'll explain exactly what this is like. I would not include the seniors and the senior folder and the bundle to the juniors in the juniors code test. I would simply include this file, app.base and index.egs for the junior, and then the rest of the project, of course. So they just have a starting point. So the first and foremost thing we see in my base file here is that, okay, there's a root to-do show to-do list to the user. Basically, how do you show the to-do list? You need to get the to-do list to the user somehow. And then there's a post to save a to-do. That's it. That's all there is. And then I'm leaving it up to the junior to solve how to do this. They can take as much time as they want. Well, in reason. If they're taking a month, then I'm just going to go. I'm going to assume that they're not interested in the job. And this is the base index.egs file, or a file that I would present to the junior so they have some understanding of, okay, that's an HTML file, I expect them to do something with it. Because I'd want to have a few hints here and there to the junior so that they can kind of get a feel for, okay, I understand that this is roughly what I'm supposed to be doing. So there's going to be a nav bar, and there's an H1 with some to-dos, and that's it. That's it. So let's get into it. Now, the first version of this is going to show some base things that if you do this, I would just assume that you're an average junior. You have basic understanding of front-end development. So let's just have a look at the server first and foremost. Let's look at the app actually. So this is a little bit a special case because honestly I didn't make a version for the juniors and the seniors. I'm sorry about that, but I think I think this will illustrate my point anyway. So okay, it was an express server, as we saw in the base case here. That's what we know about it, and the junior has understood that, okay, when we're using Node and stuff of that nature, we're going to need a body parser, because if we want to be able to do a post, we're going to need something like the body parser package or the library to actually parse that information. And then we have, well, this is just me doing my utility thing where I basically specify a path to this directory here. So let's look at this. A junior should know how memory storage works. Using a file for this is also okay. Basically what I'm saying here is that if you wanted to do a to-do list, I haven't specified anything. I haven't said that the junior has to use a database or anything like that. If the junior starts adding Docker and databases and stuff of that nature for a to-do list, it kind of depends. I would ask them why they went with the database as opposed to doing something simpler, and if they have a good answer, I will be impressed or I will be very disappointed. Because if they don't have a good answer for using a database and they just used it because they don't understand when it makes sense and when it doesn't make sense, I would question that a lot, because doing a to-do list like this for a simple little application like this, it doesn't require a database. Unless the junior says, well, maybe in the future we want this to-do list to be catering to millions and millions of users. That's a very good answer, because you need a database for that. Alright, so we include the body parser. We set EGS as the view engine, which makes sense because we have an EGS file that we showed to the junior, so they understand that they should use EGS as the view engine. And then we basically serve up the static content, which is also good. And these are the endpoints. Well, these are just different versions because I have 3 versions. But basically what I expect is that the junior is going to have one endpoint where we serve up the index file, which is going to be this base file basically. And there should be one post here for the to-dos where we basically do to-dos.push, and then we basically just push the to-do onto the to-do list, which is this thing right here. That's it. The server is dirt simple. Okay, so let's walk through the different versions. So we have 3 different versions. One for a very basic junior skill sets. I would say that we're just going to walk through the different versions. Something that is a little bit better, and something that if I saw a junior doing this, I would be very comfortable hiring that person as a junior, assuming that they have already received the verbal test. I want to say this to you now, guys. If you already passed my verbal test, which was in the previous video, most of this is just formality. This is just to make sure that this is just a formality, and it will allow me to see small hints as to how good you actually are at what you do. So let's look at the application. Said and done. This is our entire application. Let's go to version 1. Actually, it doesn't really matter which version, basically, but there's a slight difference. This is our fancy application. How cool is that? And now you're going to ask me, why in the world, Frederick, would you make such a dirt simple application to illustrate your point? And I say, it's actually very simple, because I'm not trying to hire you for your UX and design skills. I'm trying to figure out if you know the web, and if you know how to do proper engineering and front-end development. If I wanted you to, if my company told me that they were looking for someone with a flair for design and UX, I would have made this more CSS heavy, but that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking to figure out if you are an engineer, and I can do that with this simple application. Here we are. Let's have a look at the first version. So here we have some HTML. And the junior has included a CSS file. That's very, very good. And nothing else really going on here. And this is the important bit here. Okay, so the junior understands server-side rendering, which is great, because if I saw the junior using JavaScript or an AJAX call to add the to-dos on the first render, I would have been very suspicious to that, because that indicates that the junior doesn't understand server-side rendering, which is actually the way that the web has worked all the way up until you started using SPAs and all this idea of having everything on the client side came about. So I would be very suspicious of that, because it's actually bad. If you, in my opinion, it is at least, because if you're sending an HTML file without the to-dos, and then you do an AJAX call to get all the to-dos, you're doing 2 network requests when you could have saved yourself the hassle and just done one. And you can argue there are pros and cons to this, but that's at least my thinking in this. So server-side rendered, seeing this, I expect this. This is bare bone stuff. Okay, and then there's a form with an input field here of type search and some placeholder text, and then there's a script. Awesome. Let's look at the CSS. Okay, so the first thing I would notice here, I feel that this is okay. I wouldn't mind this so much considering it's a simple application. I would actually even ask a senior about this, but you're styling the base elements here, which if I were to ask, if I was hiring, if my boss told me we're looking for a top-notch developer, if I saw this, I would ask about it, and unless they gave me a really good answer why they did this, I would dismiss them immediately, because if you're styling your base tags like this without a good reason, I think that you're making a big mistake. You should use class names whenever possible, not do this type of base level styling. That's not very scalable in my opinion. Okay, so the first thing is that we were talking about responsive design. So now I see that the junior has used Flexbox, which is great for the navbar. It's awesome. They understand that a navbar is the sort of thing that you might want to be able to wrap or something like that. There's an indication here that there is some type of responsive mindset. And as we saw here on the, if we were having a little bit of attention on, say, the navbar here, it's a max width of 400 pixels. It's not a set width or anything like that. Same thing with the main content. It's a max width of 1224 pixels, 1024 pixels, which means that there are no widths. It's not a set content, which basically means that although this is a very, very simple application, I can actually reduce it down like this to a much smaller viewport, and considering how easy this application is, it is technically responsive, and I don't expect much from a junior when it comes to this. This is the sort of thing that a more experienced developer is going to help them with, but I require them to understand this idea. Okay, if I saw this, I would be okay with it. And then we have this thing here, they're grabbing some elements with getElementById, that's okay, and this is a good comment, I think, because sometimes it's difficult to tell. If you use ES6, you could argue that this developer is very good because they keep up with modern practices, but it can also be that they're using ES5 because they want to be browser compatible or backwards compatible with older browsers. So you kind of have to ask them about that, because after when they have submitted the code test, we're going to walk through the code test and talk about it, just to kind of get a feel for. You have to take what I want to take away. I want you to take away from this video is that the code I'm looking at right now is just a way for me to get something to talk to you about, because I want to see the code. And unless I see something that is completely horrible, I'm going to be pretty okay with it. I'm just going to ask you what you were thinking when you wrote this to figure out what your mindset was, because I argue that it's very easy for you to learn good practices, and you're going to learn good practices by just working with me and my colleagues. If you're going to work with me, that's okay. So it's okay that you don't have like a knowledge of like super advanced concepts. I just want you to have the right mind for this sort of stuff. Alright, so we do the prevent default so that the form doesn't get submitted, which is very good because that was a requirement. We are not supposed to refresh the page. And then we do a fetch, that's very good. And we grab the input field's value, good. And then we do a chain of a then, we return response.json, good. And then we simply render the element and append it. Or we create the list element and we append it to the list. This is, if I saw this would be a basic junior. If I didn't have any other candidates, I would be fine with this. Let's go on to the next thing. So junior version number 2. First and foremost, this tag here, the viewport tag. This is the most important meta tag there is in responsive design. If you don't know this, you go and look it up immediately. Responsive design and this meta tag, this is an important one. I'm not going to dive into exactly what it does because it requires more explanation than this video has time for, but it's a very important one. So the first junior, if I see this is a good thing. And the same thing goes here. There's basically the same thing, and nothing else is really different here. So this was the major thing in the HTML. I saw that the junior understood this meta tag. Good. Now let's go to the CSS. So this is something that I would be very happy to see, which means that if I see this, I know that the junior understands that different browsers have different default paddings and different default margins for different elements, which means that when you want to make a really good layout, you want to reset that because you don't want your elements to have some random, like some, because if you think about it, why if you're gonna want to have your designer or you yourself, you want different paddings and you want your own margins. So why would you not reset everything to 0 so that you don't have to think about, oh, that the paragraph tag has a specific margin and the H1 tag has a specific margin. By default, just reset everything to 0 and it's much easier for you to work. And then the box sizing, of course, set to border box, which is very good, which means that now you understand that the user has now explained to me that they understand how the box model works. This is very good. This is the sort of thing I would expect from a junior that is standing out a little bit. Okay, and then we have this thing again using Flexbox, which is great. There's some type of indicator of a responsive design here, and they use this junior is actually using a class instead, which is also great. They use a junior that uses classes. I like that very much because they understand that. And if I had seen a bunch of IDs or something like that, I would be okay with it. I wouldn't be so happy. Classes is the way to go, guys. I'm just saying it right now. Alright, and then we have this thing here, which is basically the same comment again. It's very tricky to determine between ES6 and ES5. It's a tricky thing. But this is the thing that grabs my attention. Aware of global scope problems. Fixed it with a closure. This is a good thing. This closure here. This is very good. If you are doing this is for you out there who don't know this, since JavaScript is a global context, that means that everything that you declare in a base file at the root level is going to live in the global scope of the browser. But by doing this closure trick here, you can actually isolate all this code so that it doesn't collide with other files on your page. Imagine if you needed two pieces of code that needed to grab the list element, and you declared them to be UL in the global context. Well, that wouldn't work because they would collide. But by doing this, the junior is aware of that this is an issue and has now isolated his or her code so that it doesn't interfere with everything else on the page. Awesome job. Very good. And then everything else seems to be fairly the same as we saw earlier. Okay, so let's go to the last version of the junior test. So let's have a look here. Okay, so the junior is doing the viewport thing. Good, good. And the server-side rendered. Good, good. And here's something different. Uses a bundle aware of modern practices. Well, that's interesting. What's this bundle thing here? If I saw this on a junior's code test, I would be most impressed, because this means that the junior understands what modern practice, what is used today. This is modern stuff. Now, I'm not saying it has to be Webpack. I'm just saying that Webpack is the way that most companies use Webpack, and it is. If I think I can go as far as to say it's the most powerful tool that we have. It's not the easiest thing, but it is by far the most powerful bundler we have. So if a junior knows this stuff, I would be very impressed, and especially if it's Webpack, because if you know Webpack, which is, as I said, it's fairly complicated stuff, if you understand this stands out, like for real. So I see that there's a Webpack config. Now this is a very basic Webpack configuration, and even with this very basic Webpack configuration, I would say that this is actually very good. A junior developer who's like fresh out of school who does this, I would say that this is a junior worth talking to. This is someone you should consider, because this is the story. I mean, there are senior developers that have no idea how to use Webpack. So I would be very happy hiring a junior that knows this sort of stuff. Let's look at this, at the CSS. Okay, so the same comment there. They're resetting things. Same thing here. So no difference here really in CSS. I'm still not super happy with all of this. I would have I don't expect so much from the junior because I can teach them better practices than doing this, but I'm okay with it. And I'm not go as you may hear, I'm not trying to. I want to set reasonable expectations on a junior, and as you can imagine, that's a little bit tricky. It's very hard for for someone with a lot of experience to think, okay, what is reasonable to expect from someone with less experience. But I'm trying my best here, guys. I hope that shows. And I'd like to think that I have a mindset for what it is to be new to something. I understand. I mean, I can just remember how it was for me. It was tricky. So here we see that the junior it's the same comment here, and they're grabbing all these elements, which is good. And there's no closure now because the junior knows that they are using Webpack, and because of Webpack they don't need to care about a global scope, which is great. And then everything else is the same, and they are using a weight. And as I said in the previous comment here, I would ask the junior, why are you using ES6? Because it can be a good thing and it can be a bad thing depending on the reason. So you kind of have to talk about these things. But I would still be very happy to see that the junior understands using ES6, because it is the future. It's the way that the way the things are moving, so it's a good thing. Okay, these are the 3 tests for a junior, and as you can see, like from the application, it's a dirt simple application. This is all and honestly, this is all I need to know whether or not a junior is good or bad. Because it's not about building, it's not about the size of the project, guys. It's not about how much code that they have to write to. It doesn't require much code. It just has to be something that is relevant to the field. By just building this simple to-do app, I have learned so much about this junior in comparison to what I would learn from simply seeing them make a implementation of a function or something too trivial. Because if it's too trivial, I can't know exactly how good they are, and if it's too big, it's going to be too much work. So it has to be this in between, a simple application that still requires them to do many different things that are all connected to their job at the company that they're going to work at, right? So what I want you to take away from this is a few things that I would consider if I was looking at some juniors like code test or something like this. And the second thing is that this is just 50% of the interview. The first part is more important than this, which is the actual interview where I just talk to the junior and get to hear their thoughts. And if this second part is basically just a formality to kind of get a feel for how much they actually know. I hope this has been useful to you. Have a great day.